we need to listen. We need to listen. I heard Karen say that the very way that the question was asked communicated compassion. And the very way that we respond to to what people say to us can communicate compassion. Listening is an act of compassion. And so we need to listen. The problem is that when somebody tells us they're thinking about suicide, it makes us anxious. And when we get anxious, we get talkative. And so this is against an impulse. If what we're doing here is learning suicide CPR, CPR is not intuitive. Like, it's not something that I kind of naturally know how to do. And I would say listening when we're anxious is not necessarily intuitive. It goes against our grain. So we have to practice sitting with the anxiety of listening to somebody who's telling us probably some pretty painful things. We need to listen. We want to ask people questions like, how did suicide become a part of your thinking? In what ways is suicide a solution to your problems? What happened that ultimately pushed you to the place where you started thinking about suicide? All of those things that dive into a person's thought process to help them kind of talk for themselves through what it is that got them to this place. If there are multiple contributaries that enter the river of suicidal thinking, what that means is that a person who's thinking about suicide is in a complicated place. They feel trapped and can't see the end to the tunnel. I compare it to Alice in Wonderland falls into a tree and down into a space. And there's a moment in that where Alice is in a room with a whole bunch of doors and her key doesn't work on any of them. And I think it feels a little like that. It feels like Alice in that room where nothing opens and I can't get out and I'm trapped, alone, afraid, stuck. And I think that if you think that in 3 minutes of listening, or 2 minutes of listening, or 10 minutes of listening, that you have the answers to this person's problems that are going to get them unstuck, you're a particular kind of arrogant. I mean, it is honoring a person to acknowledge that they are the expert on their own life. And if they haven't been able to think themselves out of this yet, neither can you in a short period of time. And so the gift that we give people, which is a gift of saying, like, I get that you're not a fool. And that means that I'm not going to swoop in here and fix whatever it is you've got going on. I'm going to give you the gift of acknowledging that I don't know either. That is a gift that we give people. So how do you think that listening can be helpful all by itself?
Shows you care.
Shows you care. Yeah.
You said it gives the person the opportunity to kind of work through their own thoughts and feelings.
Yep. Yeah. In some ways, the thoughts live up here all tied up in knots and in a big jumble. And when a person has to speak, it's like they have to pull that thread out of their mouth in a linear way. And it makes all of the stuff that isn't linear. I've had somebody say to me that for him, his suicidal thinking was like a layer on top of layer on top of layer on top of layer. And no one of those layers was an unsolvable problem, but all of them together, like, you couldn't see the layers enough to see what was needed. And he says, when I have to talk about it, I'm forced to lay all of those out separately and look at them individually. And that creates some linearity to their thinking. So that can be a gift to give people a chance to do that. Yeah. What else is good about listening all by itself?
You're not alone.
Okay, yeah. If people die by suicide for all kinds of reasons, but it basically comes down to a loss of hope and a loss of social connection, the way that you listen is social connection, right? So yeah, gives people a sense of connection.